Welcome to the Idaho Falls City Club Candidate Forum for District 33. My name is Mark Young, and I have the privilege of serving as tonight's moderator. We do thank our board of directors for their leadership on bringing these particular forums to our community. And along with that, we have some incredible sponsors I'd like to thank. The Bank of Idaho has been with us for a great deal of time. Idaho State University and KISU has been with us from the very beginning. Idaho National Labs through Battelle Energy Alliance has been with us for a great deal of time now. The Idaho Humanities Council as well has been at our side virtually from the very beginning. We appreciate their support. Without their help and efforts and financial contributions, many of these efforts would not be able to happen. We indeed welcome our live stream this evening and the support to make all of that possible. Cole Hammond with IE Productions. We also have East Idaho News here as well. I think we do have KISU here this evening as well. We appreciate their support. And so this, although we have a modest attendance here tonight, it will be rebroadcast to a broader and wider audience in the very near future and available live streaming, as I've mentioned. We thank tonight's participants. Being a candidate is not easy, and expressing a vision or a position can be very challenging. Without men and women of good intent, it would be difficult to hold an election. That would be for sure. Without information and choice, democracy literally cannot survive. From our very beginning, the Idaho Falls City Club has provided and pursued civic engagement, promoted civil dialogue, all in the effort to offer a primary source of information. And as a side, go back to our website, ifcityclub.com, and look at our very first program, June 22nd, 2007. And on that, you'll find exactly our goals and objectives as a community organization. But you'll see our first program, which was Cecil Andrus and James McClure, talking about civility and civic dialogue from their memoirs. It remains one of our prized possessions in our dialogue and our memoirs on our site. The future generations are going to have many challenges. The least we can do is provide a foundation of a solid, functioning democracy based on our Constitution. Our system will never be perfect, but we expect to be better. The protocol has been presented to our candidates tonight. They've received this in advance, and they have agreed to our methods and our procedures. Our guests are seated. We have Barbara Ehardt, and representative for District 33A. We have Senator Dave Lent from District 33, and Jeff Thompson, also challenging Barbara Ehardt for 33 seat A. We will proceed as follows. We'll begin with a 5-minute opening statement, which will then at that point move directly into questions, which they'll have the ability to respond on a 2-minute format. Our referee for this evening will be Lexi French. She has very important colors that she's waving right now. One of them is yellow. If you see that, you have 30 seconds left. If you see red, as it turns out, you're finished, so to speak. And please follow that as best you can. I know you may be in mid-sentence, but as you can. At the conclusion, you'll have a 3-minute closing statement that we'll look forward to on that regard. And then as a result, we're not looking forward or providing time for rebuttals, but if that happens, you'll have a 1-minute response time, and we'll try to provide that. If your name is mentioned and a rebuttal is appropriate, that shall be provided. As it turns out, at my discretion. I'm not used to this authority. But we will muddle through, no question about that. Ladies and gentlemen, please provide a welcome to our candidates this evening. To begin the 5-minute opening comments, we'll begin with Barb Ehardt.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, City Club and Mr. Young for doing this. And, I am Barbara Ehardt, Representative Barbara Ehardt. I want you to know that I was born and raised right here in Idaho Falls. And the reason I think it's important to say that is we certainly welcome those who would come into our great city and our great state, but it's important to know that there are people like me here who not only was born and raised, but are willing to stand and fight to keep those traditional values and that which made Idaho great, and the reason that so many people and many of you who are from out of state wanted to come here. That's important to me, and that's one of the things that I've carried with me both during the city council and certainly at the state legislature. I've worn a lot of hats, and people know me for a lot of different reasons, but I think the biggest reason that people know me is probably because of the work I do and continue to do with their children. I am all about our kids and always have been, whether it's been in coaching and mentoring, in the programs that I've sponsored and put forward for our kids in helping to teach them confidence and certainly leadership. It's important to know that to me, our kids matter. And what we're doing here matters to our kids. It's one of the reasons that I'll touch on in a moment as to why I'm so grateful that I serve on the House Education Committee. But I want our kids to experience the kind of Idaho that I experienced growing up here in Idaho Falls. I think it's incredibly important to say also before I go much farther that you see a lot of my signs, and from the beginning when I first ran, my signs said principle-centered leadership. And I want you to know that when I say words like that, it means something to me. And you might say, well, Barbara, what is it? What are one of your principles? And I'm going to share it because I think it'll come back around tonight. A principle to me that is incredibly important is one's character, one's integrity, and one's honesty, the ability to be honest, not to do misdirection and then to pretend that maybe, well, that's just what I was told. So I am honest, and that's something you can count on me as we go forward. And I think that's incredibly important. I serve on the House Education Committee, have been there for the entire time. One of the things that I've been able to do on the House Education Committee is bring to the forefront those things that will be harming our children, either currently or that we can see is coming, that the NEA talks about, that is happening in other states, that the United Nations talk about, that we can see happening. And I've been one that's been a huge advocate in advocating for our parental rights and for our kids and trying to prevent the harm that some of these programs are bringing. I'm also the chairman of the Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee, and what an honor that's been to serve in that capacity. I'll touch on that in a moment. I was appointed as one of those to the first advisory broadband committee. That includes 3 of us from the House, 3 from the Senate, and 3 appointed by the governor. Our purpose here is to allocate the funds that will be going forward to allow for more of the infrastructure within the broadband community and to try to continue to bring Idaho up to date. I also founded the Prayer Caucus. I brought that to Idaho. I've been working on it and finally brought it to Idaho. What's going to be important about that is I listened to some of the questions asked last night, and certainly the question of unity, and that's one of the things that I brought that prayer caucus for. We here in Idaho, we are, for the most part, a religious and moral people. And if we are to be a religious and moral people, we also need to be reminded of what it means to be a religious and moral people when it comes to our Constitution and constitutional values. And so with the prayer caucus, which was originally started by Congressman Randy Forbes, as a matter of fact, I wore his prayer caucus pin tonight that he personally had given to me. But the prayer caucus has been hugely instrumental in preventing some of the things that have come forward nationally with our federal government, and has been successful in so many of our states throughout the United States. It's also one that is a unifier. Every Republican has been invited within our caucuses, and I'll continue to work and do that, because that we do continue to need that unity. I believe in what's been happening here at the INL for as many years as it's been here, and the many different names that we've known the INL. I brought legislation in support of the INL. When I was on the city council, I helped to bring with NuScale and with UAMPS, the small modular reactors here. We helped to fight to bring it here. I'm quite proud of that. I've been able to engage with the INL on so many issues, including some of them lately with our housing problems, including with the problems that we're having in regards to daycare and what to do with our kids. I'm hugely involved with that. I believe in our clean energy. I also sponsored legislation that supports our hydro, and particularly our hydro-powered dams. I will promise you this, as I'm running out of seconds, that I will never do anything to breach or hurt our dams. Thank you.
One thing I failed to perhaps begin the process with was, I appreciate the applause, but let's hold that until the end if we could, so that we don't show any additional favoritism overall for the process. Senator Lent.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that, and it's interesting as we are in the legislature and we go to different events. Often Representative Ehardt is there, and I follow her. And often when she's done, I feel like I'm ready to run out onto the field and make that next touchdown. So I appreciate her enthusiasm there, and as well. I'd like to thank the City Club and those who have worked so hard to make this possible. I really do appreciate the civility the theme that they have, that they bring. That's so important. It's so easy in today's world to fall off that wagon, so to speak, and not be really productive in what we're trying to achieve. A little bit about myself. I'm also born and raised in the area. Grew up in a family business locally. My wife, Terry Lent, has taught performing arts here in Idaho Falls for children for about the last, she doesn't like me to say this, but it's about the last 30 years. So it's been a while, and she's had great experience with many families and people in our area. My community service, we have 5 children and 13 grandchildren. My community service has included serving on committees, but specifically 12 years on the Idaho Falls District 91 School Board, of which time during a period that I was the chair, we passed some bonds. One of them was to create and replace 4 elementary schools with 4 new elementary schools, and to transform Clary Gale Junior High into what's now Compass Academy. So those are all successes, especially it's important as we talk about education, which we will more tonight, but passing bonds with a supermajority requires, I think, a special leadership to bring your community along with you in accepting those responsibilities that follow. By profession, my technical profession has been health physics. I worked 40 years in the nuclear industry, 10 years in the commercial power nuclear industry. I went back to school and got a bachelor's degree in adult education and kind of transitioned into both careers, technical training. I was a nuclear facility training manager at the INL and retired as director of training for one of the contractors at the INL. In the legislature, I am currently the vice chair of the Education Committee and a member of the Joint Finance Appropriation Committee, which is the JFAC committee. Senator Cook and I both serve on that. There are 10 senators and 10 House representatives there, and our responsibility is the primary responsibility of the legislature, which is to pass and get a balanced budget through the legislature each session. I also serve on the Joint Legislative Oversight Committee, as well as the Legislative Council, which I was elected to by my peers in the Republican Party to serve on the Legislative Council, which essentially is the leadership council of the legislature. I serve on 3 national education policy groups, the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, the Hunt Institute, and I was recently appointed to serve with other top education officials in the state. Myself and Representative Horman will be the only 2 legislators from Idaho represented on the Education Commission of the states. Top issues for me are education, taxes, and managing Idaho's unprecedented growth. And specifically, I have some expertise in workforce training, so we'll talk about that later as well. I have an A rating from the NRA, and I oppose abortion, and I have a lifetime, I'm proud of my lifetime license from the Idaho Fish and Game. My legislative passion involves our education system. It involves evolving our education system across the board to meet the needs of a 21st century workforce and ultimately help our children and grandchildren become self-reliant and productive citizens. I'm especially proud of a piece of legislation that was passed not this year but the previous year, House Bill 222, which is the Governor's Commission on Educational Excellence. And hopefully I'll get a chance to talk about that more tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mark. I want to thank the City Club for putting this event on tonight, and thank all of you for being here to take your time out to hear from the candidates and to hear about the issues. Really like to take a moment, if I may, and introduce my wife, Shannon Thompson, who's here with us tonight, and my mother-in-law, Donna Borgowski, and so I appreciate them both being here tonight. My wife, Shannon, as we've been talking about different issues as these introductions have gone on, has been in public school education for 29 years. She was a 7th, 8th grade English and history teacher at Eagle Rock Junior High. One night during dinner, I quote, "It's my heart's desire to be a school counselor," unquote. She started the very next semester at ISU, and when she finished, she became nationally certified before it was required. And so there wasn't any opportunities in Idaho Falls District 91, and so she had an opening at Bonneville High School. And bless her heart, she's committed to whoever she works for to work there her rest of her life. But she changed buildings and changed school districts, total different culture. And so when she went in a total different culture, she blossomed like a butterfly, is the way I like to describe it. And so she has had a wonderful career in her 29 years of 15 years at Eagle Rock and 14 years at Bonneville. A little background of myself. I grew up on a farm. We had our own farm. Grandmother had 300 acres or so, and we rented 2 other ones. My dad worked full-time at IBM in Lexington, Kentucky, and we had registered Black Angus cattle all over the place. So therefore, we had grain-fed beef in the freezer, and it was good stuff. And we also had our own hogs, so we cured our own hams, and we made our own sausage with red pepper and sage. A little bit about me, but also throughout my career, I've been in what they call contract food service. I started out at college working for Marriott Corporation, what was Saga, and then Marriott bought out Saga. And it was in that contract business that it was in college and universities, and then I went into what they call business and industry, and I was at the NASA headquarters, Conoco, Amoco, Enron headquarters. And that brought me out here with some guys from Texas. We came out here to work for a company called Finehost, who was about a $300 million company. And I was responsible for Bonneville School District, and they were losing about $500,000 in the food service department. And so my job was to get it back to break even so that money could go in the classroom. So that's what I've done in my career. And as we got bought out, again, they wanted to up and move us somewhere. And my wife being here in Idaho Falls, been born here, we stayed here and just got drawn into politics and have been moving forward ever since. But during that time, I had an opportunity to run for office, to run for the House of Representatives, and had the distinct pleasure of serving from 2008 to 2018. It was, to me, service is service. If I'm elected and look forward to being elected, and when I was elected before, my view was I serve you. If I'm at Walmart and you want to talk to me, I want you to talk to me. A lot of times I'll see the look on your face, and you don't know if you should approach me, so I'll approach you. To me, that's what being a representative is. You're representing you, the constituents and the voters, and that's what that's all about. During that time, I served on the Education Committee, Health and Welfare, Economic Outlook. I was a vice chair of Business Committee. Our chairman was Frank Henderson, and bless his heart, he was 89 years old. In that last session, he just got sick and went home, and I became the chair for the rest of that session. Frank Henderson was an amazing legislator. I also was able to serve on JFAC, Joint Finance Appropriation Committee, for 4 years. I worked 20 to 23 budgets every session. During those years, I was responsible for carrying all of the education budgets on the House floor, from higher ed to K-12 to community colleges and so forth. And that took a lot of work, working with the presidents of colleges, working with superintendents, trying to put those budgets together that we could get through the House. And then Dean Mortimer was the senator at the time. So we worked together to get those budgets through. Plus, I worked on a lot of the other State Department budgets, which gave you a huge amount of time, a huge opportunity to see how government works. Also was the chair of Environment, Energy, and Technology. When you first get elected, everybody thinks you're automatically an expert on the issues, but we're not. And so I got together with stakeholders and all of the energy issues and industries in Idaho, and we created a program, several-week program that we put in place. One of the things I want to focus on real quick is during this time, there were many bills. I'll catch that later. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. We're going to dive right in here on some interesting questions. We have some already from the audience. We've had some questions already emailed to us prior to this evening as well, because of this week being Forum Week. So, but the first one for tonight will be, how do you feel about the grocery tax credit? A lot of tax policy been going on this last session, but let's focus on the grocery tax credit. Your thoughts on that subject. And let's begin with Barb at this point.
Okay, certainly. I know some of my friends in here and throughout the state may wonder if I actually supported that, given that every day it seemed to have been called up on the House floor. But let me explain to you how and why and why I didn't support that being called up on the House floor. I do support an actual grocery tax credit, should one come forward, and it is one done with collaboration. You know, that was something that I didn't have a say in, and if I had had an opportunity to collaborate with that grocery bill, one of the things that I would have insisted is that with that legislation, it made cities and counties whole, which means the money that they would have gotten, they would get anyway. And as we calculated, they would have gotten more money than they should have gotten. And when we're trying to also balance your property taxes, and you know that's a problem, how is it that we continue to make the very entities where the property tax problem is actually the problem? Your property taxes are a product of local entities. How do we continue to make that whole? So as we move forward and as we look at a grocery tax, I want a clean grocery tax, clean. And when we bring that clean grocery tax, it also doesn't leave a tax credit in there, as this one did. That is something that I absolutely will support.
Thank you. Dave?
Thank you, Mark. I didn't mention, but I am not debating my two counterparts here. My challenger is not here tonight, so I don't want to appear that I'm trying to debate either one of those. Originally, 4 years ago when I ran opposing the grocery tax, and I think from a consistency point of view, I have stuck with that. I do, however, in the period of time I've been in the legislature, begin to really understand the economics behind the grocery tax and how there's a couple of principles there that make sense in some sense, is that it does draw upon those people who come into our state and purchase items in our state. They essentially are contributing to our tax pool in the state. So in effect, that lessens our own tax. The other side of that is that it is a tax, and it is money that we take away from our citizens. And I think in this period of time when we have surplus and the amount of consternation this particular issue has caused in our state, I would like to see us walk away from that and look for other avenues for tax revenue in the state other than the grocery tax.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. I hope you don't all mind me talking to you by your first name. We've all become fast friends. And so, Jeff, to you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Originally, when this idea came up, I supported removing the grocery tax. But like Dave said, Senator Dave said, you start studying the economics of it, and you lose out on millions of dollars of people coming in from out of state. That money goes to education. It goes to our classrooms. And at this point, I cannot support removing the grocery tax.
Okay, very good. This particular member of our audience would like your viewpoints on what do you think of parental choice in education. I'm going to begin this one with Senator Dave Lent, please.
Thank you, Mark. So this is a great question. There is really a national movement to have more choice in public education. And I have said before, and I'll say again, I am in favor of bringing more competition into our public education in the sense that it will raise the level of the quality in overall education. I think that the trend is that we're going to see more and more parental involvement and parental control in how our educational tax dollars are spent. The challenge we have as legislators is how do we accomplish that in a way that it doesn't have a significantly negative effect on public education. And I realize there are a number of studies out there, and I've tried to read those and been supplied by members of our community to understand the dynamics of shifting to that kind of a model. But I think a student-centered, customer-based education system is probably in our future. The challenge, again, for us as educators is how do we do that without disrupting significantly our current system?
Very good. A question to you, Barbara Ehardt, please.
Absolutely. If you know anything about me, I am all about parental choice and have fought for parental rights and the rights of our kids to be governed by their parents for the last 2 terms that I've served. And what's been fantastic is this ability to work with Dave, as he and I both serve on education. As a matter of fact, and I see Senator Cook up there, we've been able to collaborate for the last 2 years where we've had 5 of us out of the 6 where we've been able to work together and keep trying to work on education. So myself, Senator Cook, Senator Lent, Representative Foreman, and Representative Marshall. So when it comes to parental choice, I believe what has happened is we've had a complete misdirection. And I saw this also when I was living in California, and when we saw the NEA come in, because they were so worried when the parents were rising up and wanting more rights for themselves to be able to care for their kids in the 1990s. And it's completely, that's a little bit disheartening, because I believe that the two can coexist. Nobody's trying to get rid of nor harm public education, and I think we need to make that clear. When we had, I'm going to forget the name of the bill, the Hope and whatever the legislation was in giving more in true educational choice, one of the things that points that was out there is that it was going to cost us billions of dollars. It was going to hurt the education. It wasn't going to do that at all. As a matter of fact, less than $6,000 was going to follow the kids, and the rest was still going to go to the schools. Nationally, when we look at this, we are looking at only 3% of the kids basically having that money follow them. We have to do something that will both help our public schools and allow our parents to be in charge of their kids. And I believe, as Stephen Covey would say, there is a win-win opportunity out there, and I'm going to continue to pursue this. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Jeff, question to you. What do you think of parental choice in education?
Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. I believe in parental choice. I believe that the God in heaven gave the children to the parents, and it's up to them with their education. I do not believe it from the standpoint that we tear down our public school system, which I believe there are legislators in Boise that want to do that. They want to completely tear down K through 12 public education in Idaho and replace it with who knows what. So I will not stand for that. I will stand for the teachers in public education. I will stand for public education. I'm a product of it. Many of us are. I will stand for teachers who decided to go into an industry because of their hearts. The people the students are the ones that make a decision about the character of us individuals. And when they see a character in a teacher, man, woman, it doesn't matter, they're going to listen to that teacher. I'll tell you an example. I gave a speech several years ago to third and fourth graders about the process of the legislature. There were 2 classes. It was packed. Students came up to me afterwards, encouraging me, glad that we had this conversation. One student came up crying. She grabbed my leg, she was so short. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, because at a 3rd grade level, she had lost her hope of following her dream because of finances. But because of the talk we had that day, she believed that she could follow her heart's desire. That's what education's about. It's about people pouring their heart into students and nothing less.
Thank you, Jeff. We're going to continue on this subject of public education. The state legislature allocates about 63% of its budget on education, while local funds account for somewhere in the ballpark of 25% of the funding per student. When it comes to funding Idaho schools, the real gap is at the local level. A significant reason for this is because of the supermajority requirement on the bonding issues. Do you support efforts to lower the supermajority requirements in the Idaho Constitution? I'd like to begin with Barbara Ehardt on that.
Okay. The real problem here is not answering this particular question, because when it comes to your property taxes, I'm very hesitant to do anything that's going to raise your property taxes and kick you out of your home. One of the areas that I've been addressing for the last couple of years is the fact that, unfortunately, when we had Governor Risch, he made some changes that systematically impacted the funding of our schools. And unfortunately now, especially in this funky time that we're experiencing, it is impacting our schools even more. And what we are in the perfect situation where we can make, with the growth we're experiencing in this state, and with the 1.9 billion we experienced this year, similar stats the year before, and no doubt this upcoming year we're going to experience more money. Now's the time to change. I believe that fundamentally our state should be supplying the necessary resources for our schools. I think it is wrong to go to the people to tax them, because ultimately they're being taxed, and they're being taxed out of their homes, and essentially we're asking some people to vote for other people who can't afford it. Some people with their property, especially I know in District 93, it's been a huge concern as to how much of their property continues to get taxed. And oftentimes what most people don't understand when it comes to the taxes, we are not reducing them, we are doing a tax or a burden shift. And so with that, I believe now's the time to look at fundamentally changing how we fund education. And it should go back to the state as opposed to the change and the shift that we had with the sales tax. I believe the state has a fundamental responsibility. It's in our Constitution, and I am for changing that and taking away the burden of our property taxes and property owners.
Dave, questions to you.
Thank you, Mark. This is an interesting question for me, having served on the school board here locally for many years and been through many of these bond elections, so to speak. And I would say that, let me just start out. A lot of people aren't aware that when it comes to school taxes, when you look at your tax sheet that comes to you in the mail, it has a number of items on there. There's plant facilities levies that are on there. There are bonds that are on there. Bonds are typically your capital projects. Your plant facilities typically are your buildings, maintenance kind of things. And then there's a category that's called supplemental levies. And what Representative Ehardt is referring to, I believe, is the increase that we've seen in the last, since I think it was 2006 when that occurred, of supplemental levies in the state of Idaho. And and I'm going off the top of my head here, so I believe there's about 115 of the 150 or 60 districts that now have supplemental levies. to supplement the revenue coming from the state to conduct the business of public education in their areas. Of that, I believe, again, that's over $220 million that's coming in as a result of that. If we go back to the Constitution of the state of Idaho, Article 9, Section 1, the legislature to establish a system of free schools, to establish and maintain a general, uniform, and thorough system of public, free, common schools. What's happened, and as Representative Ehardt alluded to, is that shift in it's an interesting parallel, because at that time we were going in the early 2000s, we were having another economic boom. It seemed reasonable to go ahead and shift some of that surplus revenue into the schools. Unfortunately, when we hit about 2008, 9, 10, when the economy went down, so did the funding. Thank you. I could go on and on. But the end result there is I would support lowering it to 60%. We've done a lot of study on that, and 60% seems reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Jeff, to you?
Would you mind repeating the question?
Not at all. The issue of lowering the levy from 2/3, 66 and a third to, where are you wanting to keep that or maintain that, or would you be willing to look at lowering that for supporting school funding?
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. The biggest thing that bothers me about that 2/3 is 10 times out of 10, the minority of voters are deciding what the majority of the voters have to deal with. So I think it needs, I've supported that for quite some time, but I believe it needs to be lowered. What that number is, I want your input on that number. But I believe that some senators, House members have worked on that. And I think that my best thing that I saw when I was in the legislature is when a senator and a House member come together, work on a bill together, and bring in people from both sides, and then it can pass both sides. But what also comes into this equation is, yes, the Constitution says they shall provide a uniform public school system. The system has shifted. Bonds and levies are constantly being in the system at the local level. At the state level, we say the best government is at the local level. So why don't we trust the local level and let them handle those bonds to run the public schools if that's what they want to do? Trust the voters, trust the people to vote on what they want to do in those public schools. I support public school completely. Matter of fact, I'll just announce I've been endorsed by the Idaho Education Association, and I take that very well. I'm glad to have that endorsement. That is the measure of how much I support public education in Idaho.
Thank you, Jeff. I think we have a theme here on that particular question. You all want to facilitate making it more accessible to public facility funding in the state of Idaho. I think that's a pretty fair statement from what you all have said. One of our attendees this evening has a question again on education. I think this will keep to that theme as well. What is the most important issue facing our public schools, and how will you address it? So that's kind of an open question, but very important one at that. We're going to begin with Barb Ehardt as well at this time.
I hate to do this, Mark, but I've probably begun all of them but one.
I know, but I can't start with Jeff. So go ahead, Dave, if you'd like to.
Okay, thanks. What a great subject, great topic. So for me, if you look really at the numbers, about 35% of our students that go through our system actually end up with a college, university degree. About 20% of our students who start the 9th grade do not graduate from high school. So we've got a spectrum here in a system that was primarily designed as college prep. The way our education system is right now and the way it has been designed through the years, and from my generation, of course, my parents said, you will go to college, and we built systems to send us all to college. Unfortunately, since we don't all go, we end up with a lot of folks nowadays who have some college and a lot of debt and no degree. And we're putting them out into a workforce, which is the space I come from, workforce development, employee training, where technology has moved so rapidly in the last 20, 25 years that the demands of education in the workforce are actually evolving as to what we need. Our K-12 system needs to evolve into a different system that more adequately prepares our children and our grandchildren to meet the needs and demands of a 21st century workforce. The education system that we currently have essentially is over 100 years old. When I think about my grandfather and great-grandfather at the turn of the 19th century, 1910 or so, that's when automobiles came in. That's when higher education, as we understand and kind of see that model today, came to be. My father's day, graduating from high school was a good thing. And in my day, the goal was to graduate from college. What we see today is that more and more employers want something. That big sweet spot is something more than high school, but not necessarily a four-year degree. That's why our community colleges are so important. And this year I was able to help support bringing $10 million more to support career technical education, both at the high school and at the post-secondary level. Thank you.
Jeff, to you, please.
You mind repeating the question?
Not at all. What is the most important issue facing our public schools, and how will you address it?
In my mind, as I've thought through this for several years, as I see over and over again, is the mental health of our students. A few years ago, we had 20 students from Pocatello to Rexburg, all walks of life, take their life. To Chuck Shackett's credit, the former superintendent of Bonneville School District, he was originally from Utah, and in Utah they have a program called Hope Squad. And the legislature funds that program to bring it into all of their schools, junior highs and high schools, maybe at the elementary as well. But that program came into Bonneville High School, and it went into effect immediately, saving students' lives. No matter what the issue was, what the student was going through, that they go out here in the hills and take their life, the loss of one life is too much less 20. That is a major issue that in our public schools that needs to be addressed. Yes, we have all kinds of issues, but to me, that is a major one. The last year I was in the session, I asked the speaker for an interim committee to study this. We had so many things going on, it just didn't happen. But I will, once elected, will make this an issue to bring legislation, bring the Senate on board with it, to where we can look into this and see if there's something, even if it's just finding financing to bring in the Hope Squad program to all of our schools. Yes, our children are our parents' responsibility, but there's something being missed to lose that many students, and that's what I'll address.
Thank you, Jeff. Barbara?
So we have a number of ways we can approach this, and I'm going to approach it from what has just happened due to the COVID shutdown. During the COVID shutdown, forcing our kids to go online and forcing our teachers to teach online was something that never should have happened, because our kids' learning loss, some of what Jeff had mentioned, but their depression, their anxiety, the loneliness, the loss of self-awareness of who they were. I could go on and on about the list that all occurred because as adults, we made decisions to keep those kids home, and it was the wrong decision. You know what the learning loss was for our kids during the COVID shutdown? Almost a 10% learning loss. I don't even know how you make that up. And so as we go forward, and certainly some of the things that Representative Lent had indicated, we have a couple of things in mind. How do we accommodate our kids and provide them with an education that best suits their learning style? And I'll tell you what, one thing we found out, some of our kids did all right online. Most of our kids did not. I cannot tell you how many parents had come to me and they were in tears because their straight A, valedictorian-headed student, was receiving 2 Fs. And that 2F theme was common during the shutdown with our straight A students. That can't happen again. We have to do all we can to ensure that our kids have the best possible educational experience, and if that means if that means for some school districts going 4 days a week, fine. You know, if that means other school districts 5 days a week and providing a Saturday opportunity, fine, whatever it takes, that's where I'm going, and that's what I've been trying to work to make sure happens, and why I'm happy to continue to work with Dave Lent, because some of his ideas are very forward-thinking, and I really appreciate that. It's all about our kids. We cannot let what happened happen again, and we can't let it happen to our teachers. And I have also been endorsed by a ton of parental groups. Just saying.
Very good. One of our audience members would like to ask this question that's come up a couple of times, even on the emails. Does the Idaho Freedom Foundation have too much influence on what gets attention in the state of Idaho? Maybe you could approach it advantages, disadvantages of the Freedom Foundation. Jeff, we'll begin with you on this one, if we may.
Thank you. When I served in the legislature at the very beginning, the Freedom Foundation didn't exist. And there was a gentleman up north, I can't remember his name, but he would take 20 bills after the session was over with. We didn't know what the bills were, and he would grade us on those 20 bills. And to me, that was an honest, straightforward system. And then all of a sudden, a gentleman passed away, left a lot of money, and the Freedom Foundation was started. And then other investors came in, board members, and then it started a grading of all of our legislators. And with that, it has gotten deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where Speaker Bedke, what happens, you're sitting on the House floor and people are watching how certain people vote, and then they follow them, especially if they know they're a leader in the Freedom Foundation group. And so Speaker Bedke, to his credit, turned the voting board off so nobody knew. And so there were several days where he did that, and then he eventually stopped that. My experience with the Freedom Foundation, let me just back up for a minute. A few years ago, my father passed away, and I have a whole different perspective of life now. I used to believe it was all about conservatism against non-conservatism. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with power. It has to do with control. It has to do with making people vote the way a certain handful of people want us to vote. It's kind of like the minority controlling us through the Freedom Foundation is the same minority that wants to tell the majority how their public schools are going to operate. As I look at the Freedom Foundation and I look at the different tactics, and believe me, I lived through it for several years, I don't think it's in the best interest of Idaho at all. And I say that from the standpoint that over and over and over again, people vote because somebody told them to vote. Most times they don't even read the bill. And most of the time, my experience in being in the legislature, the legislators that follow them are no, no, no all the time. We can't continue what has been built in Idaho voting no. We have to roll up our sleeves and go to work.
Thank you, Jeff. Dave, we probably put you in the middle more than once on some of these questions, but would you care to answer that question for us, please?
Thank you, Mark. So just as a personal example, this year I had a bill that was a simple bill. It's been my experience that a lot of our kids who graduate from high school don't have really direction as they go through high school, and so the relevance of that whole experience in some senses gets wasted. And as a school board member, when you shake those hands, when they walk across that stage at the end of the year, and you realize now they're going to try to figure something out the next day, we've missed the boat, it's too late. I had a bill this last year that was about career exploration. We did some study across the United States and found out that in middle school, if you can get kids started to think about what they might want to be and then give them some direction and let them kind of pick where they would like to go, that self-direction that comes and that interest that comes from that is very powerful in helping them bring relevance to their education, and also it brings, I think, effectiveness to the tax dollars that are spent on education. But essentially, I had a bill that was career exploration in the 8th grade, all students in Idaho. Just like in Idaho in the 4th grade you get Idaho history, my thought was in the 8th grade you would get 1 semester of career exploration. And it would be broad-based, and essentially it was help them figure out who they are, what they like to do, and then help them connect the dots as far as what they need to do in high school and for going forward to do that. It was rated negatively by the Freedom Foundation because the education system was telling parents what to do. And the other thing it did, it misinformed in the report that it was requiring a career path to be developed. That already is in code and is being done for high school students. And the third thing it said, it took away responsibility from parents. This bill, I wrote it, and it specifically said 4 times in the bill, parent involvement, signing off on the plan, working with the school, teaming with the teacher, so that every year even the parent would be involved in what's happening with that space. It was negatively rated, passed the Senate with no negative votes, and failed in the House because of that.
Interesting. Barbara?
You know, as I listen, I know that my opponent has accused me of, being right there with IFF, and I think that's sad because, as you guys know, when I served on the Idaho Falls City Council, what was I? Conservative. Many of you wrote things about that back then. Oftentimes, I was that 1-5 vote, right? Do you think I changed when I went over there to Boise? I did not. I'm still conservative. However, as you can see from the votes this year, that I still did what I do. And there are a lot of things that I'm sure they would like me to have done. I don't know. It's not as though I spoke with them to ask permission. And that's where I think some of the misnomers come. I don't know with whom they speak. And these accusations that generally are out there that somehow IFF controls people, I don't think so. But if they do, they probably don't do a very good job of it because some of the legislation they really wanted, they didn't get. So I think it's all about a lot of nothing. But they are a conservative think tank. And when they do a report, when they write something up, boy, I'll tell you what, they dot their I's and cross their T's. And as far as whether or not, I appreciate having just one conservative think tank in Boise, just one, I think it's a good thing. As I've had an opportunity to travel to a few states, mostly it's been by Zoom, but to travel to a few states, they have a ton of family policy related groups and think tanks, and we don't. And so I'm okay with it, especially knowing that the other side has so many. But when all is said and done, we are ultimately accountable for how we vote. And so it's also my contention, and I've shared it with other people, that I think questions like this and conversations like this actually give more power to the theory of the power that Idaho Freedom Foundation has. Because they really don't have all the power you think they do. But they are a good, positive, conservative think tank. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I think I was mentioned, can I rebut something?
Not quite yet. Not quite yet. We're going to keep moving.
Okay.
As it turns out, fire season is kind of standing. We're right in the middle of fire season already. It's very early in the season. We've been facing drought conditions for years, it appears. Taking all this into consideration, many of our listeners want to know if you believe in climate change, if you think that's real. If not, why? If so, what would the legislature possibly be doing to support or adapting through these dramatic climate condition changes that are going on in our world? We'll begin with Dave, if we may.
Oh, thank you. My answer is pretty short on this one. I believe that climate change is a natural process, and as was mentioned last night, we have had an ice age and we've had a tropical age, and we might see those again. The real question is man having a negative effect on our environment? I think that's the real question. And I would say in some cases we know that we have. We know that there is pollution, and we know that those things do happen. And I think it's appropriate in those cases to be conservative as far as protecting our environment, having pride in ownership, if you will, in the place that we live. I believe in that. But I also believe that it can be oversold as well, as a headline, as a political item. So to the extent that it has been portrayed to us through media, I think it's been oversold as far as climate change.
Okay. Barbara, would you pick that question up from there?
Absolutely. I too believe in climate change, and I think it's scientific. Now, just like Dave said, the real question is, to what extent do we as man create or add to the change in the climate? I may differ with some of my conservative colleagues here. I think we do add to it, but not as much as others would believe that we do. And so when they say, what is it that we should be doing? Good heavenly days, look at what we've done. Look at the progress that we've made, especially from the 70s. I was the one that grew up in the 70s watching the TV commercial where you were watching the canoe on the river come, or the lake come in, and the Indian had gotten out and he had a tear in his eye because of all of the pollution. You know, so from climate change to environmental protection to how we treat this earth that we've been given, that's important stuff. So if you want to know what policies I'm going to advocate, I'm going to advocate that the United States of America do all that it can to make sure that countries like China do their part to protect our environment, because they, more than anybody right now, are ruining our environment. And that is what I will 100% support. Why I continue to do those things and believe in those things that are reasonable. And just as a reminder, if we end up having, a blowover here, with any sort of volcano or ash, it'll do more to damage our environment than all of the pollution in LA combined. So let's not give ourselves too much credit for what the Lord created.
Jeff, to you.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that question. I'm running to represent Idaho Falls, to be part of the process of the future of the great state of Idaho. When I was in the legislature before, chair of the Energy, Environment, Technology, we brought in energy experts and we focused on the environment moving forward. There's no doubt about it that our climate is changing. We see trends changing all over the place as far as storms. You can go throughout the Northwest, you can go throughout Idaho, surrounding states. We see it happening all the time. As my good senator said, a lot of it's man-made. But we've had some studies through the Environment Committee in Boise, and we have been trying to address this for years, and we've had interim committees with progress and what we need to accomplish in the state of Idaho. And that could be a shifting of our energy from fossil fuels to other things as well. But we need to focus right now in Idaho Falls and Idaho.
Thanks, Jeff. We're going to go down a little complicated question here in a sense, but it's come up several times. We had a huge surplus going into this session. I don't know exactly what it ended up being by the time the legislature began to deal with it, but at the end of the day, there was the largest tax cut in Idaho history, $600 million tax cut on that issue. This particular question was asked in this fashion: how much of that surplus was of our state of Idaho tax versus COVID relief money? And does the tax cut put us in a challenge or a fiscal cliff down the road when the COVID money perhaps goes away? If I may begin with you, Barbara.
I see them as two distinct and separate issues. We had a $1.9 billion surplus. That had nothing to do with ARPA money, nothing. That $1.9 billion surplus had to do with people who were coming to the great state of Idaho. Why were they coming to the great state of Idaho? For a number of reasons which I feel like I had a lot to do with. First and foremost, in 2019, I was one of the advocates that absolutely wanted us to stop regulation, and it was through House Bill 100 ultimately where the House regulation ended up being stopped. Our governor decided to just deregulate, cut all regulation that he could, and lo and behold, that just opened up a whole new portal for Idaho. As a matter of fact, we are able to brag to every other state in the union about that which we've done in deregulating our state. And by deregulating our state, look at how many people want to come to Idaho. But that's not the only reason they want to come to Idaho. They want to come to Idaho because they want to be able to continue with traditional family values. They feel like Idaho is a place that still supports that when they're in their other states, especially back east, and they're being told that they can no longer have prayer and religious talk in the public square, or they can no longer carry or use their handguns and support their Second Amendment rights. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and we still value our Constitution. So between our family values and our Constitution, people want to come here. And if they want to come here and support our values, we absolutely want them to come here. The other then question had to do with the ARPA money, and you're looking at like $2.5 billion in ARPA money, some of which I'm hoping that as we get to, I'm able to address because some of it I did support in spending it, and some of it I didn't. But the two entities are complete and totally different. And with 10 seconds, I think, is there a concern going down the road? No, there's not a concern. The government, right now, we have a huge cash reserve, but we need to be concerned about the people and making sure that they have their money. It's their money.
Jeff, to you, please.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. Whether there's a surplus or not, there was a lot of confusion last night about the different numbers on all of the candidates that showed up. We have ARPA money, we have the regular money. Through the end of the night, from best what I heard, that when the ARPA money is gone, we're in a deficit. That is the numbers that were used by all candidates at last night's debate. The ARPA money came from the federal government. It's the same type of process in 2009, my first session. We were halfway through the session, and we were in a downturn economically, and the shovel-ready project money came in, and we had to start the budget process all over again. And so that's all money that comes from the federal government. Are we in good shape with our budget the way we are right now? I believe so. But we have to be careful with the ARPA money that is not overlapping, because if we're not, we will lose, we'll spend money that we don't have any way to replace it other than raise taxes. So we have to be very careful about that. A little bit to delve into another question, if I may, Mark.
Please.
Question was brought up last night about all the legislators being brought back to get involved in spending all that money. Well, you've got 70 in the House, 35 in the Senate. That's 105 legislators. You've got an executive called the governor. He's the CEO. You've got JFAC, 10 members from the House, 10 members from the Senate. My opinion is, if the governor wanted the legislature to be involved, the avenue to do that was through JFAC. My opinion is you bring 105 legislators back at any given time for any issue, and you have anarchy. And part of that is the process for me, from serving for 10 years now, is headed towards a full-time legislator, and you don't need to pay for that. We are a part-time citizens legislature.
Thank you. Dave?
And I hope I don't drift too far. It seems like the more answers you get, the further from the original question I have. So would you mind repeating that?
Well, we're talking about the largest tax cut in history, and in the $600 million tax cut, there's a perception that the COVID relief money that came into the general fund and the state taxpayer money was part of all of that surplus, okay? And so the context is, if that $600 million tax cut, which clearly happened, and the money from COVID relief from the federal government, that happened as well, but it's not going to happen again. So with lower tax revenue and demands for the budget continuing, are we causing ourselves a fiscal challenge in the not too distant future?
Okay. So let's just back up for a second and talk about the tax revenues and the where they come from. So with a booming red-hot economy, you're going to see sales tax much higher than normal. You're going to see, with employment high, you're going to see income tax much higher than normal. You'll see corporate tax. All this growth contributes to a accelerated rate of revenue coming into the state. So that's the state stream. And then we have there's ARPA, there's other funds as well. There's a number of funds out there that are drawn to come from this. So an important point I think that I'll make, and if you don't remember anything else I say about this particular topic, I would say this. I was in the room along with Senator Cook when the word came from Washington, D.C. through one of our senators there, because we were very concerned about all this money coming. What are we going to do with it? What should we do with it? We're hearing people say we should send it back, we should do this, we should do that. The word came that the checks were written and that our grandkids, our grandchildren would be held liable to this, and we know that they will. There is no way really to send this back. And sending it back, I don't believe, is a good steward of the dollars that we are afforded to work with in the state. So to break this out, Governor Little made a very interesting comment in his State of the State address, I believe is where he said it. He said, as an old rancher, It's not how you manage in the poor years that determine your success. It's how you manage in the good years. We have a couple of good years going here. The governor has a very detailed plan about how to invest in Idaho. So that money that's being spent, yes, our grandkids will be liable for that, but it will be invested in items that they will benefit from: infrastructure, recreation, bridges, roads, water. Those things will all be involved. So I wish I had more time, but thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Just had a question handed to us that we'll continue to move on down this road. It's amazing how time is scooting along this evening. We'll continue on. What would you do to support affordable housing for the working folks and the working people in the state of Idaho? It's becoming an affordability issue is clearly upon us. Interest rates are rising. It's clearly getting worse. If I could begin with having Dave deal with that particular question.
All right, I'm up to bat again. And I have notes on this, but trying to find them that quick is a challenge. So here's our dilemma in our state. We have, and this is not only just our state, but nationally, we have what's considered the working poor. So these are people who are really getting hit hard. These are the folks that live month to month, week to week. Their income is basically being taken to live. And when you compound that with escalating housing prices, taxes going up, rentals going up, and their wages aren't going up as fast as those are coming up, you're heading for a disaster. And that means that those people who are working poor are going to be homeless. And the challenges that we have, and one of the things we did this last session was there was $50 million put in the Workforce Development Council, and I'm trying to remember how many million was set aside to produce 1,000 low-income housing units across the state to accommodate this. I think there's some vision there. But the problem, again, we're going to have, and this is for all of us to face, as we see this terrible inflation that's eating us up, we see housing prices, we see rental prices, and we don't see necessarily our wages going up to match that. It's going to be a problem, and it's going to hit a lot of people really hard. So I'm a proponent of we need to have an answer to support our working poor.
Thank you, Dave. Barbara, to you, please.
Boy, Dave's correct. We're in a funky situation that has absolutely been perpetuated by this administration. You cannot do what they've done. I think the amount of money that's been printed in the last 2 years encompasses 80% of the total amount of money that we have. You cannot do this and think that somehow that's going to create prosperity. You cannot spend your way and borrow your way into prosperity on fake money. And so as we look at the problem, I do believe as Dave said, it's only going to get worse. Some of us, people like me, you hear all the time people saying, hey, I might have to work 2 jobs. I've worked 2 jobs all my life. Matter of fact, I've worked 3 jobs. It's not uncommon. And I don't even know if that's going to be enough for all of us moving forward. One of the things that absolutely has to happen, though, is property taxes, the ability to own our property, that has to decrease. We are working on it this year, and as we are working on it this year, there were those who don't want to do that. We need to go back. We're going to have more conversations because, I'm willing to trade off when we look at all across the country how much local property taxes that there are, with being able to tax locally. We were looking at possibly raising user tax, sales tax, 1 to 1.7% in exchange for ridding ourselves of all of the state and county taxes, everything except the school, because we, again, still vote on that. I think it's going to take some creative thinking like that to come to a solution so that Idahoans can keep their property, and particularly their homes. And I engaged in this during the summer in conversation. It was ultimately decided the first tax cut or tax, the income tax would be given back to everybody, and they said that's the fairest way to do it. I understand that, but at some point, I want to see it go property taxes.
All right, thank you, Barbara. Jeff, to you.
Thank you, Mark. I've had a lot of discussion with key people in Idaho Falls, Idaho National Lab, our businesses, our education facilities, our public schools. They're bringing people in to hire them as teachers, hire them as scientists at the lab, and they can't find anywhere to live. My response to that is, it's not coming from the federal government. Is the federal government controlling or being responsible for inflation? Absolutely. But what I see going on here with a business finance degree and an MBA is what the market will bear. People are coming in here from other states with a lot of money, and they're driving the prices of the housings up. And so people are selling, they're getting more money than we ever thought. I saw a house the other day at an open house 3 years ago. You could have bought it for 150. It went for 350. So that's what we're facing right here. Is that driven by inflation in DC? Not from my economic background. It's driven because people have money and they get in bidding wars, and that's where we're at. How do we do that? I agree with the senator. We have to keep people together. I think the city of Boise is leading. Do I agree with how they're handling all of that? Not necessarily, but at least they're getting out of the boat and getting in the water and trying to come up with something. And so it's some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years with the COVID and with these different things. It's easy for all of us, including myself, to be an armchair quarterback. But the experts in the schools, I'll trust them. I'll trust the experts at the Eastern Idaho Health Department. Matter of fact, over some of these different things, we lost the best director in the health department we ever had. She left and went to the Idaho National Lab. A lot of these issues are being used in a way to divide us. We need to come together like our forefathers did and make our future better.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, here's a question that will follow. The order of the answers will be Barbara, Jeff, and then Dave. Do you support the new law governing abortion? It permits relatives of crime perpetrators to sue the medical provider up to $20,000 for administering the procedure. If not, would you support legislation that permits abortions in cases of rape, incest, and when a woman's life is in danger?
Now, boy, I was waiting for you to ask that question because last night you all sure had it wrong. I was actually a sponsor of S 1309. And so let me tell you what the legislation actually does. This legislation does follow Texas's heartbeat law, second of its kind in the nation to get done. Guess what? There is not a single provision in there that allows for a rapist or his family, immediate or extended, to sue for damages. That simply does not exist, and like so many things, those on the other side have perpetuated a narrative that simply is false. So let me tell you what this legislation is designed to do. This legislation is designed to save lives, the lives of babies. I stood on the House floor as I got to share in this with Representative Steve. And this was my, I said, you know, I was trying to pass it here, what it really means, it's 60 babies have been aborted in the United States, and the United States, and I put it all together, and I was born around, and I was born around, so I went to look at it, and I started to see, okay, well, let's look at more states. The state of New York, how many people live there? 20 million people. California, Texas, 30 million. That's still not 62 million. I finally had at England, 6 million people, 6 million people. You could take all of England and empty it out, or take all the people in England, and we've still aborted more babies in the last almost 50 years than live in England. This is terrible. This is a great sin of our time. We have an opportunity to do something about it, and that's what I'm not trying to make excuses as reasons to abort a child. I'm trying to provide a means forward to save the life of that baby, and I am proud of this legislation and proud to set the record straight.
Dave, to you.
Sure, thank you, Mark. I did support the legislation as it came through. I think that, for all of us, or for most of us, we have to kind of decide when does that life actually start. And it seems fairly objective to say at the point of a heartbeat, that's a measurable thing. And in the legislation, it talks about what that means. That's a point when, for me, I can I can say I think that's when life begins in that particular entity. And then I think I have a moral obligation to protect that life. So that's my position. The heartbeat bill is, as the governor said, it will be tested. We're not sure where it's going to go. And like a lot of legislation, I suspect this will be tuned and tuned again over the years to try to get something that is, at least from a legal point of view, acceptable. So my position is I did vote for it and I do support it.
Jeff?
Mark, thank you. I am anti-abortion, no doubt about it. For 10 years in the legislature, I was endorsed by Idaho Chooses Life. There's no doubt about that. Does abortion issue have to come up every session? Absolutely not. I learned a long time ago from the leader of the state Senate, Bart Davis. These issues are brought up every year, and there's different lobbyists in Boise that is their whole line of income. And they have to run bills in order to raise their income. I don't want any babies killed any more than anybody else does, but I can guarantee you 95% of the members of the House of Representatives in Boise are anti-abortion, as well as the Senate. And I've seen these bills come up, and I've seen people get riled up emotionally, raising their voices, and then if somebody gets tired of these frivolous things happening, then it's used against them when they vote against it because they're tired of it. Has nothing to do with the actual bill. Has nothing to do with the actual issue. Good people are anti-abortion, and they shouldn't have to be in a corner every year emotionally over bills that have to be run that shouldn't be run. I like what was said last night. The Constitution of the state of Idaho only tells us one thing to do each session, and that's create a budget and get out there and go home. Many times I heard over and over again, the longer we're there, the more damage we do. And we get sideways on all these different types of issues. I, along with many others, as I've said, am anti-abortion. But we don't have to have a bill addressing this every year.
Thank you, Jeff. The answering protocol in this will be Dave, Jeff, and then Barbara. Where do you stand on the critical race theory as discussed in this last session? Do you believe Idaho teachers are teaching critical race theory? What evidence do you offer to support your assertion? And,
Thank you, Mark. Of course, that's been a hot issue for us this year, and it was the year before as well. I had the opportunity to work with Senator Crabtree on House Bill 377, and he kind of drug me along so that I could be in some of the small group meetings where it was discussed and worked out with members of the House and others. Just to quote from House Bill 377, the Idaho legislature finds tenets outlined in subsection 3A of this section, which it's talking about here, often found in critical race theory, undermine the objectives outlined in the rest of this. So it basically, what 377 did is it went back to our founding documents as far as the Idaho Constitution and Idaho Code and reemphasized that it's illegal to do those things, to discriminate on those bases in our classrooms at all levels. In my experience, of course, on the school board, I think you have teachers who sometimes say things in the course of teaching their courses. And they tend to be of different persuasions as far as being more conservative or liberal. And you deal with those at the local level. I think that's local control. You have locally elected officials in your school boards. Those issues should be brought up and dealt with at that level. I will say this, again, as far as critical race theory goes, it's my opinion that it's very important that we teach our young people what discrimination is. Mm-hmm. What I don't agree with is if we teach them to discriminate. And that's what we have to, that's that fine line we have to walk. And we have to stand behind our teachers and have their backs and say, if you'll be with us in the way we approach this, we'll support you. But I'm convinced that, and I don't think we have a lot of it going on, but I do think on a national level, it is coming. I think more and more we're going to see this influence in our state, and it's right for us to stand up and stop it now.
Very good. Jeff, to you.
Thank you, Mark. Critical race theory is, in my opinion, just a disgrace. It's terrible. Is it in our public schools? I don't have any proof of it. The best thing of proof I can go on is the State Board of Education has done an investigation and they say it doesn't exist. Is it coming, potentially coming? Possibly. We need to be prepared for that. But I think it's, again, this is an emotional issue that is brought up to divide people, put people on one side or the other, and here it is, our world's falling apart, so we'll make emotional decisions that we don't think through. I know tens of hundreds of teachers here in Bonneville County in eastern Idaho, and none of them know anything about it. So here's the standpoint where I would like to come from. Every organization, as we all know as adults, is different. We're all different people, we're all different human beings. We're going to say something in a classroom that 10 other ones won't do. Some people hear what one person did out of 500 teachers, say in District 91, and labels all of them. That stuff needs to stop. It just needs to end, because we have good people in education, we have good administrators, we have great teachers that want the best for our students. I'll tell you what I encourage you to do. It's here getting to the end of the session, or end of the school year. Go to these high schools. Go to Bonneville High School at awards night. See some of those students get awarded scholarships, and the teachers and the relationships between them, the students, and their parents. There's no CRT in any of that. Can it come in the future? Possibly. But I have a tendency to believe my administrators, my experts in these fields. And that's what my State Board of Education tells me.
Thank you, Jeff. We're coming close to, I'm not sure this is going to be the last question, but we're going to continue to run through it.
Mark.
Your thought?
Mark,
Was there?
Barb needs to answer.
Oh, we hadn't finished Barb, I'm sorry.
Well,
I'm in too big a hurry. I'm sorry, Barbara, please continue.
well, I suppose if, I would like to be able to answer this, because I too worked on H377. And what we have to understand, people, is that things usually don't begin in Idaho, although the Fairness in Women's Sports did, and look at what that's done nationally. 15 states have now signed on. But what usually happens is Idaho, if you're wise and you're that watchman on the tower, you'll look out and you'll see what's happening throughout the nation. You'll look and see what's happening in California. You'll listen as they have the Loudoun County meetings and the anger that the parents have because they're not being listened to. And we can avoid that by being wise stewards. And that's what I think Senator Lent and I have been trying to do, especially being on the education committees. We're looking forward and we're looking at that which is coming, and we're saying, you know what, not in our state. We're not going to have the 1619 project here. We're going to make sure that we address critical race theory by saying that you just can't teach that one group is better than another. It is so simple. There wasn't a lot to it. Surely you don't disagree with that. Would it be right to call us the oppressors and everybody else the oppressed? No. Especially if we want to do what has been suggested over there, that we want to bring people together. Then in order to bring people together, we have to be proactive and make sure these things don't come to our state. By gosh, this is our state, and I'm going to do all that I can to make sure it stays the kind of state that I had growing up. I had a fantastic education with fantastic educators. As a matter of fact, that's what I went to school to be, as an educator, because I was so inspired by those people who inspired me. And that's what our educators can do. Let's make no mistake about it. But the critical race theory is real. And unfortunately, we do have on camera in Idaho a few teachers bragging how they will continue to teach some of these things, albeit under other names. You know, hopefully our school boards there will take care of it, but you know, I'm going to support Idaho and stand up for her.
Okay. Will be our last question before we get into our closing statements. And it's kind of been coming up quite a bit lately in the news. A lot of folks in the running for elections have chosen not to debate or to hold forums, particularly Governor Little, Congressman Simpson, in these primaries, which indeed are so important to our state of Idaho. Your thoughts about so many candidates choosing not to have these forums at this time of the year. If I could begin with you, Jeff.
Thank you, Mark. I support open forums, just like we're having tonight. But I also take into consideration that at the statewide level offices, they've been running for over a year. Those issues have been out there for a year. They've been in different environments where they've been speaking and going forth. I stand with the governor for not going to that debate. If that's what he's the CEO of the state, if he feels that he has gotten his message out enough, the other side's gotten their message out enough, I support him not doing that. I also support the congressional race. Mike Simpson made the decision not to do that. In my opinion, there's been Lincoln Days. I've been at Lincoln Days where his opponent spoke. There's been plenty of discussion. So I support that type of behavior. At the same time, if there had not been enough things going on for over a year, there should have been a candidate forum like this. But if it's going to be a nice candidate forum, if the city club did like this, Mark was a great moderator and we could talk, that's great. But if it's going to get into tear them down, attack them mode, no, we don't need any more of that.
Very good. Barbara, to you.
Wow, we definitely have a differing point of view here, and that's good. You know what? It's not right to deprive the people of the opportunity to hear with the questions that the people want to ask. Can you imagine Lincoln said no to Douglas? I mean, holy Hannah. And then to think that there's been enough on the congressional level, when you look at those Lincoln days, I think that Mr. Smith has been given 2 minutes of the most, and it's what's he going to talk about? He's certainly not talking about enough issues that Mr. Simpson is. I mean, I believe that they should be in a forum where Congressman Simpson can answer for wanting to breach our dams and what that's going to do to Idaho. Do not deprive the people of an opportunity to listen to the candidates. At the very least, I mean, if you're worried about civility, then you're going to have to worry about it during the debate. Let the people speak for themselves by showing the fact that maybe they have no civility. That in and of itself is also very telling. And that can help. And that can help us as Idahoans make up our minds as to the person that we want to support. There's a lot of things that go into a debate, and that's all part of it. So to close off the opportunity to hear from your people is about, that's definitely antithetical to a constitutional republic. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Okay, we have arrived now where we're going to be doing the 3-minute closing statements. But we're going to let Dave speak first.
I'm still trying to process everything that's being said. I'll just keep this really short. I think when you run for political office, you run a campaign. And the objective of your campaign is to get votes. And that's how you go about it. And whatever you feel you need to do that, to try to impose something is, I think, kind of crossing. If people don't like what a certain candidate's doing, then they shouldn't vote for him. But I think we're kind of getting into a gray area when we start trying to dictate what you have to do and don't have to do as an elected official running for office.
Thank you, Dave. As it turns out, we are at the last 3-minute station. I appreciate your humor with the moderator here. If we may begin with Barbara, and then Jeff, and then Dave on their 3-minute closing statements.
Well, Mark, I opened to begin with, and I'm happy to open to close with. So thank you for this opportunity again to be here. You know, the fact of the matter is that in my short tenure, I've accomplished a heck of a lot. I've been able to stand there and be that voice for you. I've been able to bring legislation that has been, a lot of it bipartisan, some of it 100% bipartisan legislation that has shown the ability to work with all of us. You know, one of the things that we continue to hear about is the fact that there's a lot of contention. Well, within a democratic republic, with a constitutional republic, of course, it's about diversity of ideas. Diversity of ideas means a diversity of ideas, and you're not always going to support those ideas. And that's where that civility has to come in. And you know, one of the things that many of my colleagues at the legislature, they refer to me as coach. Now, obviously, the lobbyists can't. They have to call me representative. But my colleagues love me. And they love the energy, the emotion that I bring. They love the unity that I bring. They love the ability that I have to bring people together. And that's one of the things that I'm able to do, to speak with those farther to my right and those farther to my left, and to allow for conversation. Some of the legislation that I brought that we can't overlook, I'm surprised that we at least didn't ask it. I'll ask it now. Do you support the fairness of women's sports? We certainly know that Senator Lent did, as he voted for it, but what an incredible opportunity to bring forward legislation with the foresight, seeing what is happening. There is a war on women, and I've got some senators in particular on the other side that like to remind me that, war on women. There's a war on women taking place, and it almost feels like we're trying to be erased, and that the standard for a woman actually is a biological male, and that's simply not true. I and my fellow females are the standard for women's, and we come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, but we offer a lot. And so that fairness in women's sports, protecting opportunities for girls and women, as Title IX dictated almost 50 years ago. You do realize we are in the 50th anniversary of Title IX, June 23rd, 1972. Protecting those opportunities, 15 states have brought that legislation, and I'm so proud of it. The other legislation that I've been able to bring, minimum marriage age, which Idaho didn't have, making it 16, supported -2 votes, almost unanimous in the House and in the Senate. Legislation supporting the INL and the work that they're doing, supported unanimously. Legislation supporting our hydropower, supported unanimously, and the importance of keeping that there. This last session, I was working with Democrat Representative John McCrosty in bringing campus free speech, and it got hung up in the Senate on 14th Amendment on a technicality. We're going to be bringing it again next year. I was just informed today, University of Idaho just got sued, lawsuit being brought forward because of more problems with their campus free speech. It's things like this that I'll continue to do to protect constitutional rights and to stand for you and stand for all of us. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Jeff?
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Again, thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, and for the City Club putting this on, Carrie and Jerry Scheid as well. What I wanted to mention earlier, ran out of time, was what I focus on when I was in the legislature before and will continue and when I get returned, is bills that bring back value to Idaho Falls. For instance, Senate Bill 1219, I carried on the House floor. It was construction manager, general contractors. There was no definition of what those terms meant. There was no verbiage in that bill until we changed it that made people go out and put it out to bid for 3 bids. That is the bottom line of that bill. And what that did, it created competition, and that affected Idaho Falls, as we've heard earlier tonight, in District 91, School District 93, as they're building those buildings, and now with our new event center, it saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars. To me, that is what it is about, a legislator bringing something back home. Senate Bill 1252, I was able to carry that on the House floor as it related to INL workers' compensation. We reorganized how that compensation was figured and ended up saving over $9 million, therefore creating over 100 high-paying jobs. That right there, to me, both of those, is bringing something back home that affects and helps everybody, not divide people. Senate Bill 1352, I was part of creating the Health Community Crisis Center. It was brought about under Governor Otter. Idaho Falls was the first community in the state to receive one of those facilities, and it is worth its value in gold into our community. That, to me, is what a legislator is about. I applaud my opponent for taking on the fairness in women's sports. I would encourage her to go do that full time. I think she definitely has passion about it. I think there's a need for that. I would encourage her to go do that full time and let someone else represent you as Idaho Falls. And the reason I'm saying that is during the longest session in the history of the state, she missed 30 days taking care of that issue. And I applaud her for taking care of that. But what happened in Boise with the people of Idaho's business? The part that was mentioned earlier about the Freedom Foundation. Folks, I served there. I know what the Freedom Foundation does. It's a lot more than a think tank. And so I'm going to show you something here that my opponent's lifetime score on the Freedom Foundation is a 90, which is an A, okay? And therefore, the two flyers that have gone out right here, one, what's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
anyway, they were both financed by the Idaho Freedom PAC and another PAC financed by the Dole PAC. Thank you for your time.
Very good.
I appreciate your vote.
Thanks, Jeff. Dave, we're going to go to you, and then Barbara, you're going to get a 1
Thank
minute
you.
rebuttal.
Thank you.
Dave, to you.
Thank you, Mark. I would just like to say we live in a great place, in a great community. I've lived and worked in 7 different states across our great country and had kids in school there. And we came back to Idaho Falls to raise our family. We love it here. We love the values, we love the people, and we love, most of the time, the climate. I'm finding my kids in Arizona becoming more desirable to visit them more often than I thought, especially during the winter years. But we have had great investments in education, in our infrastructure, tax relief. This has been a great year for Idaho. And it's a great year to focus on our conservative Republican standards of supporting the free market capitalism, effective and efficient education, a strong national defense, deregulation, the red tag, was it red tag? The Reduction Act that the governor did touched 95% of the government regulations in our state to reduce or minimize them. Energy independence, we see that with our area here with great things on the horizon, and traditional religiously based values. Those are the things I love about here. And very quickly, I'll just say my upcoming priorities in legislation, I feel very strongly we need to focus on our school boards, building their capacity. They've really been under the gun the last couple of years and really stressed. There's more we can do to help build capacity of those good people who want to serve and give back to our community. We need to do that. I'm a believer that we can do better with bringing performance elements back into our education system, and starting with our superintendents, helping their annual evaluation be more performance, student achievement based. And something that's very important to me and I have a great passion for is Idaho Falls and what are we doing to help our students and our community grow, especially economically. So I serve as vice chair in a regional task force for economic development on the training subcommittee. I sub-chair with the director of training for the National Lab. We have gone up and down the valley, BYU, Idaho, College of Eastern Idaho, ISU, and we've done analysis to look at all the jobs that exist and the ones we think are coming to the area, and we're doing a top-to-bottom vertical analysis of what's ISU best at providing, what's College of Eastern Idaho best at providing, so that we get this really economic, streamlined approach to providing. So we've done that. In addition, we're bringing a career technical high school to Idaho Falls. I was hoping to get it going this fall, but it's going to be next fall because of the construction delays. That will be focused at that 20% of the students who are not graduating from high school. They now will graduate from high school with marketable skills and most of them with jobs. Very important thing. Also, you're going to see in the news coming up, working with College of Eastern Idaho, they had an MOU signed this last week with INL, and also the College of Eastern Idaho is going to be expanding their Workforce Development Center. You're going to see a new facility here in Idaho Falls developed and should start off this next fall. Great things happening in education and workforce in Idaho Falls. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. Barbara, we're going to turn to you for 1 minute rebuttal, please.
I appreciate that because it's a shame we had to get to this point, and I'm going to challenge East Idaho News and the Post-Register to follow up on this and report on it, because what I said in the beginning, that principles to me are honesty and integrity. My character matters. And so I contacted our majority leader to say, hey, you know, my opponent is spreading a lot of lies, and here's one of the lies, claiming I missed 30 days last year. And he said, just go to Carrie Mullen, who's the chief clerk of the House, get her to, she has the official records. So Carrie sent back to me, and the news can easily find it, and I challenge them to write on it. So last year, On January 18th, I missed one day. On January 2nd, I missed a half a day. And January 3rd, I missed a full day. I missed 2.5 days last year, 2.5 days. This year, I missed 3. Other than that, I haven't missed a day. This is what matters. If you're going to elect somebody to send them back there, you better first worry about their character, their integrity, and their willingness to be honest. And that's one thing that matters to me. I am honest. And this misdirection, leading the wrong way and then claiming, well, that's just what I was told, that's wrong. When it comes to standing up for this legislation, I've done a lot of it via Zoom, but I have been able to stand up in person a couple of times, and that was mentioned.
Very
So
good.
thank you very much for that opportunity to rebuttal.
Thank you, Barbara. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the conclusion of the Legislative District 33 forum this evening. Give our candidates a round of applause. We would remind you that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, same time, here, we have District 35. Please come and join us. Thank you so much for coming.